words, this is God's program, that this is going to happen. And so God has given us to giving them up to make certain that this is certainly going to happen. This is not just conversation. I was thinking about this, when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Have you ever thought about it? That God was there in the person of two men. And it is at that time that there's this action of violent desire for homosexuality. They almost tore down the door of Lot's house, and God finally had to, and all the men were active in this, but there were two men inside that house who were God Himself. Can you see again that doubling up in a very interesting way, that God is there as two. When God came to Abraham just before this to announce this destruction and the coming birth of Isaac, God came as three men. It was His purpose to make that announcement. Here it's two men, and it identifies with this idea of when it is doubled up. It's here God is seeing what is happening, and it identifies here with God giving them up once, God giving them up, God delivering them once, God delivering them twice. It really is scary information, because there's no sin that has been emphasized as strongly as this. Where God is using this kind of language, that He is saying twice, He has delivered them. We do find that God did harden Pharaoh's heart again and again, but we don't find that language, I don't think, in Genesis that He actually, or in Exodus, that He actually delivered Pharaoh to these sins. But here we do find that kind of language. Now, the fact is that this kind of language is indicating that the world is on the threshold of Judgment Day, because it is a sign that we're right near the end, when God delivers up mankind to this kind of a sin. And we are living in a day where we see this sin all over the world. How do we know it's a sign for the end? Because the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, this passage in Jude 7, is so important, both in telling us that eternal fire means that you eternally are destroyed by a fire that itself is not eternal, but it is also a sign that is emphasizing this particular sin of homosexuality. Verse 7, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities about them, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh. You see how God is, in that one sentence, in that one verse, is calling attention to that ugly thing that was happening when God, posing as two individuals, came to rescue Lot and announce to Sodom and Gomorrah that they're on the threshold, they're going to be destroyed momentarily, and to take Lot and his family out to safety. Homosexuality was there, and here God refers to that, going over to strange flesh. And we know it's strange because a man is not to have sexual relationship with a man. A woman is not to have sexual relationship with a woman. But this particular crazy sin, God has given, He has delivered the world to this. That's why we should really be sorry, feel sorry for those who are in this kind of a movement like gay pride. We should really, and many of us have relatives somewhere down the line. It's a very common thing, and slowly on they're getting victory after victory all over the world. It's more and more accepted, and we ought to really feel sorry for them. Those dear people, they have been delivered to this, and they're not going to come out of it. They're delivered to this. This whole movement is a tremendous sign that God has given us that we're right on the threshold of Judgment Day. And if we had no dates at all, we would know that momentarily Judgment Day is going to happen, just like it was just that day that all this homosexuality was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, and that night it was totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. It's right on the threshold. This is a tremendous sign that we're right at the end. And we should never, never look down with distaste or maybe that's the wrong word, with vengeance on these people that are gay pride people. We should look with sorrow. They have been delivered into this. God has taken all the restraints away. Mankind by nature is so sinful. They're capable of these kind of sins, and the only reason they have never been very prevalent in the world, there's always been some homosexuality, but nothing at all like it is today, or nothing at all like it was in Sodom and Gomorrah. God put it there. God allowed it there in order that it would be a sign. It would show us how it's going to be when we come right up against Judgment Day. And that's where it is today. It is a dreadful, dreadful sign, and we should just feel sorry. When you read about a gay pride, never look at it with, okay, you're going to get what you did. The way you are living, you're going to get it. You really are. No way. Poor people. Poor people. They have been sentenced. They're under the sentence of God to this as a sign, or they to go after strange flesh, as a sign that we're right on the threshold of Judgment Day. All right, now that was the fourth sign that we looked at. As we go on in Romans chapter 1, as again integrated into this, is we find in verse 28. It goes on. Verse 28, even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, and that goes back again to what we had started out with in verse 20 and 21, that the whole world doesn't want to recognize God as God, that He is the Creator, the supreme ruler of the whole world. Every time I say that, I think, I can't help but think of the super arrogance of mankind. The super arrogance. We live in a world that is so complicated with its millions of life forms and all the activity that goes on in nature, and every day the sun shines again, or at least it's going to shine if it's not raining, and God provides the rain for the crops, and God provides beautiful flowers, and you plant seeds, and wonderful things happen, and mankind should be in awe all the time, just in awe. How can it be that I can live in this kind of a world? Certainly, God, whoever you are, God, whoever you are, I thank you. I thank you. I don't deserve what I see all around me. But mankind, the arrogance of mankind is so fantastic. It's so awful. But anyway, I get back into that. It just hits me every time. But now we read in verse 28 of Romans chapter 1, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind. Now, see that word gave over? Delivered. Delivered. That's the same word. Delivered. They're sentenced. The world is sentenced to what follows. Wow. That means, and when you're sentenced, it means you've been judged and found guilty. And like Christ was sentenced by Pilate, he was going to go to the cross and be crucified. He was going to die there. And that's the way the world is, being sentenced. God is sentencing the world to Judgment Day. He is preparing the world for Judgment Day. And the proof of it is he gives a whole lot of sins if we get honest about it. Some of us have lived 50, 60, 70 years ago. I use this illustration because it kind of sums up the whole business. Here are two farmers, or a farmer and a banker in a Middle Western farming community. And a deal is made, or two, all right, a farmer, I'm going to sell you my cow or trade it for this or whatever. They went down to an attorney and drew up a very, I got to make it a little bit more stringent. I'm going to sell you 20 acres of my land. And so they went down to an attorney and very carefully drew a very complicated contract to make sure that each one would follow through in all the terms. No way. Most of the time deals were made, they shook hands. That was it. That was the contract. They shook hands. If you went around in the world in that day, you find that most people did not work on Sunday because that is the Lord's day. All the shops were shut, and other things that were going on. The Bible itself was used in many primary schools as a first reader. They began to learn how. Children began to read by reading the Bible. This is in a land where the Bible was available. Of course, this was not in a land where they did not have the Bible. But where they had the Bible, there was a respect for God. I use this illustration again and again. Here's a group of men that belong to the church, and they are really getting a little careless about serving God, and so they're at lunchtime and they're drinking beer. A pastor comes along. What do you think happened to those beer cans? Behind. They didn't want the pastor. Oh, pastor, how are you? And so on and so on. They had because that pastor represented God. They had a respect for God. They knew that there was something that wasn't quite right about their drinking of alcohol. And today, what would happen? A pastor walks along, invariably, oh, pastor, oh, yeah, let me have a can of beer, too. I'm one of you, you know? And you're right there in it, and there's no difference of any kind. What I'm trying to say is, those of us who have only lived 50 to 100 years, any of you 100 years old here? Please stand up. I don't. Well, anyway, let's say 50 to 90 years old. There's a couple of people here that's almost 90. And if we've lived in the world during this last period, the world has changed in a fantastic way. Today, if you sell a piece of land, or if you make a deal with your neighbor, you better go to an attorney and spend the hundreds or thousands of dollars it might cost to have a very careful contract drawn with every I dotted and every T crossed, covering all the possible exigencies of what might happen and so on. Because if you don't, you're going to get ripped off. you are going to get ripped. The Bible says that here.